Hello, welcome to Sounding Board, a presentation of Soroptimist International of Novato, whose mission it is to improve the lives of girls and women globally and nationally. Sounding Board is produced, crewed, directed, moderated, all by members of Soroptimist International of Novato. I'm Freda Kaplan, and it's my pleasure to have as my guest tonight, Ruth Weiss. Hello, Ruth, and welcome to our show.
Hello, hello. Hello, Freda.
We'll be talking about your book, Can't Stop the Beat. This is your 15th book.
Correct.
And it took 18 years to get out.
Well, let's see, since 1993, is that 18? Yeah, that's
And
right.
why was that?
Well, how the book started was like this. In 1993, I thought I should write some autobiographical stories. Well, I have so many stories. How do I start? How do I go? I thought if I take a theme and run it through the decades and complete that and then go to another theme. And I decided to write about all the black people that I've known. The first one being a girl in my class in Vienna when I was 9, and we became very close friends, and I'd never seen a black person before, but we used to walk home from school together. Met again in in Chicago in I think it was 1950. It was 12, years later. But anyway, I was writing these stories, and when I was through with them, I thought, that's enough for right now. I'll try another theme another time. Tried to get it published, and it wasn't happening. And then in, 2009, 2008, Krista Stippinger in Vienna, who'd already published 2 of my books, bilingual, German and English, asked me for another manuscript, and I sent her that. For a year, we tried to get it translated with different translators. It was impossible because it has so much black idiom. I mean, how do you translate black don't crack? It just doesn't. So I very unhappily told Krista to stop. I'll send her some other material. And I thought, this happened in February of 2010. And I thought, well, too bad it's not going out. A month later, I get a call from England from Michael Weiss, who I hadn't seen in 20 years. He moved from Los Angeles to England. And he said, I have a press, I have a publishing house now, and I'd love to publish something of yours. And he usually publishes about shamans, about art in Bali, but he said he would try it, and he really wanted something. And do you have anything that's autobiographical? I said, I'll send it to you tomorrow. I had it ready to go. And when he got it, received it, he said this is exactly what he was looking for. And then we were talking about the cover. Well, I knew Michael in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s, when he was working with Stephen Arnold, who's a filmmaker, on films. And that's when I met Michael. This particular photo on the cover is a still from one of the films we worked on called Pyramid. It happens to be the only film that we worked on that never was completed. I have never seen that photo before, but it was in his files, and I liked it very much. In fact, I liked very much what they did with the book and the help I received. And it's the first time I have a book that's on internet, too, that people can get that instead of having to dig through my studio to see what we can find. So I'm very happy with this book. So,
what is the address on the internet?
www. and then one word, small letters. I don't have a computer, so this is, but here it goes. Divine Arts Media. That's DIVINEARTS MEDIA.com. And the name of the book is Can't Stop the Beat, and because they have other books that they do. And that's as much as I can say right now about that.
Well, apropos to that, Ruth was called the goddess of the beat generation. Herb Caen, columnist in San Francisco, coined the term beatnik.
Mm-hmm.
He described the followers of Kerouac and his friends and people that you were with. It was a play on the name of the Russian satellite Sputnik. And the U.S. was anti-communist, anti-Russian. This was the McCarthy era.
Oh, yeah.
And so beatnik was not really a complimentary term, although now we forget that.
Well, none of us ever liked that term, really. I called myself a jazz poet rather than a beat, but today it seems to have caught on in a way that it has a meaning of thinking for yourself. I mean, the artists, really concentrating on change in the world, and it's actually become something to be proud of. Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
In the 1950s in North Beach in San Francisco, that area became an oasis for many artists, and it was the bohemian part of the city with cafes and restaurants and exhibits and places that people could speak and write, and it was a breeding ground for new ideas. So this was Ruth's home turf in 1952,
That's
right?
The rents were also low. I actually scored a room for as I said earlier, for $10 a month.
Wow.
But it was a very small room, and it had a window to a light well, and it was just enough room for a mattress on the floor and a box that I scored in Chinatown to put my typewriter on. I don't know if I told you I actually hitchhiked with my typewriter. Yeah.
To your $10 room.
Well, first I left Chicago, went to New York, from New York to New Orleans, and from New Orleans back to Chicago. And in 1952, I arrived in North Beach, yes.
And this was before the beatnik era
Exactly,
began.
about 3 years. But it was still considered the bohemian part of town. And I mean, people like Soroyan and Steinbeck and all used to hang out there, That's before my time.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
By 1955, North Beach was starting to be known as a beat area, and there was a club called The Cellar. Ruth innovated merging poetry and jazz there as a regular feature. She had experimented with it in 1949. Jack Kerouac and Lawrence Ferlinghetti were recorded doing poetry and jazz there, but Ruth was not credited with paving the way, even though you were the first person to do it.
That's right.
You didn't get any credit for it.
No, I have a funny story to tell you. In 1978, a book of mine came out called Single Out. And Doreen Stock had published several books, and including mine. And a lot of the poems in that book were the ones that I used to read at the Cellar. So as she was finishing getting ready for publication, I said, by the way, I innovated poetry and jazz in the Cellar in North Beach. She said, well, that's a strong statement. I said, well, it happens to be the truth. She said, okay, I will do it. A week before the book party, I'm in this Chinese restaurant, and there is Sonny Nelson, who was one of the original owners of the Cellar, sitting in a Chinese restaurant. I said, what are you doing here? He was visiting one of the other musicians in Sausalito. And I said, how long are you going to be around? He said, a couple of weeks. I said, please come to my book party and tell the editor that I did do this. And he was able to prove that this really happened.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I have good timing with synchronistic things. I mean, that I would walk into that particular Chinese restaurant at that time to someone I hadn't seen in years, so...
Timing
Yeah.
is very important.
Very important.
As soon as the beat movement reached a certain level of notoriety, of publicity, it was commercially exploited and sensationalized. Beats were portrayed as criminals, as lazy lowlifes. It was a complete contradiction of the original beat philosophy, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You should have seen the tourists in their polyester coming with the cameras, take pictures of us. Huh, yeah.
Well, people were portrayed from that era wearing striped shirts and berets and cigarette holders, right?
Well, it was usually black.
Black
Black,
tights.
all black, yeah, tights and that. And don't forget the beret, that actually came from France. And don't forget the eternal bongo.
Oh yeah, the bongo drums.
You know,
Yeah.
I have to tell you, this is just off the wall. In 1996, there was a show of the beat area in at the Whitney Museum in New York. And I was invited because my film, I made a movie in 1961 called The Brink. And I was invited by the curator of the films, not by the rest of it. So anyway, they asked me to bring books and things, and I brought it to the front desk, and they were going to sell it during that show. And then I looked, and here was called a beatnik package, and they had a beret, a bongo drum, and they were selling it at the Whitney Museum.
Do-it-yourself beatnik outfit.
Yes.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. Exploited.
Yeah,
Just a
yeah,
bit.
oh yeah, just
Yeah.
a bit. It's been going on forever, yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
some of the films that they put out, we're all just stoned all the time and wish we could, but we didn't.
And drinking Chianti in dark cellars.
Oh yeah, and no, it was really ridiculous. But the media needed a little package to project, and yeah. And some films were made for Kerouac's films. I think one was The Subterraneans. I've never seen it. Leslie Caron was in it. But I've heard it was really a bomb. It was really bad. So I think it's out of print, but it was called The Subterraneans, one of Kerouac's films. He was very unhappy that it was filmed.
So he had no part in the actual filming.
Oh, no, they just, they give you some money and here's a contract, and he didn't pay any more attention, But see, I'm very different. I'm into details. I drive people crazy with that because I want it just so. And one thing of my 15 books I'm really very proud of, every one is a beautiful job, and they allowed me to be part of it, to direct it, and every one of those books, although today this is the most important as far as being available out there, but every one of those books had an individual touch, and the publishers were always wonderful to me. Yeah. Oh.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of Jack Kerouac, I know there were a lot of other people in North Beach at the time whose names have come down to us that we know, like Allen Ginsberg and Ferlinghetti. And
Ferlinghetti, I have to hand it to him. He's 92. I'm only 83. And he's still hanging around, and he does a lot of paintings.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
still has his City Lights bookstore.
Well, he doesn't do that much with them anymore. So he can just go ahead and paint, and yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
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 Are there any other people that we might recognize? Notice they're all men that we're talking about, and you're the only woman. Were there other women in the Beat movement?
There were definitely. You have the book. Have you seen the book Women of the Beat Generation?
Yes, yes.
See, what's her name? Brenda Knight of Canary Press. She called me in 1995 and asked about. She had found me at the Bancroft in they've been collecting my work, so she realized that I belonged to that period. When she called me to ask some questions, I was a little bit hesitant. I didn't know if this was another, scam or something, but I finally realized how dedicated she was to bringing the women to be known from that time. And I was able to help her. I got Jan Kerouac's phone number because I had met her a couple of years before when we did a benefit for her. Lenore Candell, these are people she wanted to know but didn't know how to reach them. Other people I suggested who she didn't know about, and it's quite a book. And as both Brenda and I have agreed, there's no way you can put everybody into it. There's always somebody left out, but it's pretty cohesive. It's very well done.
That's
Yeah.
Women of the Beat Generation.
Women of the Beat Generation came out in 1996. And then, what was it? Audio Literature bought the rights for it, and they made cassettes. There's a cassette available 5.5 hours by the same name. And you hear the voices of those women who are still alive. And then I was asked to write a short poem as an intro for each of the women. And also I read 3 of the poets who are gone now. One was Madeline Gleason, one is Joan Haverty Kerouac, and one is Helen Adam. I read their work, and then there were other people who read other people's work. But it's six tapes, or 5.5 hours of the voices. Yeah. And
That's Women of the Beat Generation.
Generation, yeah. But it's the same as the book. It's the same woman follows, the same. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was visiting the Beat Museum in San Francisco, and I saw your bio was on the wall and your picture, and Diane DePrima was next to you, and they had a separate section, I think, for the women.
Yeah.
And that I thought that was very interesting, that you were on the wall there in the museum.
Well, that museum, I think they're doing a wonderful job. How that whole story happened is that Jerry Cimino, who has the museum, and John Cassidy, who was Neil Cassidy's son, who is Neil Cassidy's son, were in college together, and they decided to get on the road to different universities to tell them mostly about Kerouac and Cassidy. Well, as they went along, they decided they really wanted a place that was permanent rather than moving around and expanding it to all the other people from that period. And they've been in existence, I don't know how long, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. They're doing a very good job. They're located on Broadway near Columbus and Kearny. And they really are doing something, and I've enjoyed every reading I've ever had there. Yeah. And in fact, I was there a few weeks ago, and I had standing room only, so it was great, yeah.
People are still appreciating the literature.
Well, it's the young people.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of younger people are starting to know more and more about it, especially from Europe. I've had several interviews on radio and stuff, and when people ask to interview me, I ask to meet them there because on the second floor it's very quiet and good lights. So I've gone there to have people interview me. And inevitably, there'll be some people who are wandering around looking at everything who want to come up and hear what's going on. And they're often like people in their 19, 20. And then many from Europe. I mean, there are people from Germany and Holland and who've actually, Italian, who've come up and wondered what's going on, yeah. And some of the younger people are very interested. There seems to be a complete revival about that period because there's a lot of parallel things happening between today and in those days, as we know.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Are there other Beat museums?
Well, that's the only Beat museum, but there are other. There's a bookstore that has a lot of work on poetry, not just Beat, and they have jazz twice a week called Bird and Beckett. It's out in Glen Park in San Francisco. It's a wonderful bookstore. It's small, but imagine they have jazz at least once or twice a week. They have book readings, they have workshops, they have a section for little kids to go look at books. And the store is very small, but somehow I didn't think he would survive very long, but he's been able to tune into grants and get things going. And I think he and City Lights are connected. I mean, they talk to each other. It's not a competition thing. And yeah, all right.
That's wonderful to hear about, that there's a revival.
Yes.
And that
well, you know what's amazing is that these big corporation bookstores, I don't want to mention names, I have done everything to take over the whole literature scene and pushed out a lot of the small bookstores. Well, what's happening currently is that some of these places like Borders and that are out of business, and the little The small stores are thriving.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So it's turning. There's a turnaround here.
Fortunately.
Yes.
Finally.
Finally.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So, what
And
else can I tell you? I don't know.
what was the
I don't want to go on and on forever with my
No,
stories.
I was just wondering, you had mentioned that the climate now is similar to
The 50s.
the 50s.
Oh, absolutely.
Repression, paranoia
Paranoia, fear.
of the government is,
Yeah, I mean, people in so-called high places
I see.
really are destroying a lot. Can I mention a film that I've just seen that tells it all more than I could ever? It just came out a few weeks ago. It's called Thrive, Thrive, and somebody who belongs to the family of Procter and Gamble, part of the very wealthy people, was asking his father, why are there so many poor people and we're so rich? His father actually said, we need to stay rich so that we can control them. Hmm. And this film touches everything from ETs to cancer cures and the pharmaceutical companies and the families that rule on the top, me, Rothschild, Morgan, and others. And it's incredible. It goes back into Egypt. I mean, Michael Moore has done some work on this. This goes beyond anything Michael has done, and it's a wonderful film. And it shows what's going on today, and the last part of the film shows some solutions. Yeah.
That's nice.
But
That's very nice.
so anyway, I
Good.
had to
That's
mention that.
a
I know
very
this.
positive note.
But I had to mention this.
That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Thank you. We're winding up the program now, and I want to remind people they can buy Ruth's book, Can't Stop the Beat. It's online at
DivineArtsMedia.com.
Okay. So thank you,
Yeah,
Ruth.
thank you.
And let's see. Actually, would you like to read from your new book? Would you like?
Yeah. Yes,
Could you read from this book for us?
I would love to. There are two actual poems that are published separately, and then there's one part about I Always Thought You Black, and the other one called Compass, a Trip in Mexico. And I'd like to read one of those poems,
Okay.
which talks about my being first in San Francisco. And another time, if we do this again, I would like to read from the book itself some of my stories.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's wonderful.
Ten, 10 cometh the dragon, skims on 10,000 feet, drumming, remember, along the street of applause, pauses. It was 1958, a dragon year, at Broadway. No, it was 1952. Right. It was 1952, a dragon year, at Broadway in Columbus. My last hitch from Chicago says, this is where you belong. Found my room on Montgomery. 10 Montgomery. $10 a month, with a light well, and a shower steaming on the roof through the fog. Across the hall, Professor Foon kept music in his room. Tongue click against tooth, a nervous habit from near miss of bomb on his home in Hong Kong. Butterfly harp, I danced, he played, kept us both from being afraid. We spoke no English. I wrote in it, though, and ate with chopsticks. But not pizza. 10 fingers for that. One late night walk uphill on Kearney from Pacific. The man stopped his black and white and asked, "What are you doing out at night?" Just then, Frankie Lupo, another up-all-night freak, stepped through the gate of his Kearney palace, told the man, since I didn't speak, she just likes to walk, then invited me in to share pizza reheated on coal, with a glass of red to warm the soul. Talked of Mama upstairs, through glass clink and fog blink, regaled me with tales I'll never forget nor remember. My first book, Steps, 1958, 41 dragon steps, up the steps of Kearney Kasbah, where for years we smoked, joint to the east, made a point in the west. One more step west is the sea. On Pacific, the international settlement, where I worked the tables in the house of blue lights. The girls, dark and grace. How I loved that place. The music was so fine. Lullaby Broadway, garbage truck, smash, crash at dawn, fuck, can't sleep. Climbed a Coit Tower. One more step up, see sunrise. 10:10 cometh the dragon, skims on 10,000 feet, drumming, remember. Along the street of applause, pauses. China Gong, 1990. Where's that monkey, Kaisik Wong? His float's a saga. The crowd going gaga while he floated away, while he scampers away, and floated away, scampers in his robe of Atlantis. Chi-Chi, Chi-Chi, is that you? 10:10 cometh the dragon, skims on 10,000 feet, drumming, remember. Along the street of applause, pauses. The dragon arrives.
Thank you, Ruth Weiss. And we want to thank Hal Davis also, who was on percussion for us tonight. And thanks to our Soroptimist crew and to Rick Tucker and Leon Johnson from NPAT, Novato Public Access Television. They help us greatly, so thanks to them for our production of Sounding Board.